The chilling discovery in the canyon's depths. It was a crisp March morning when the hikers set out for what they thought would be another tranquil adventure in Colorado's deep canyon. This spot was infamous for its jagged cliffs and narrow trails, but its serene isolation had always been a draw for those seeking escape from their daily routines. That morning, the air was thick with a mist that seemed to crawl up from the depths of the valley. Every sound, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the rustle of leaves in the distant wind, seemed magnified, almost oppressive in the canyon's eerie silence. Mike Thornton, a seasoned outdoorsman, led the group. His two companions, Jenny Marshall and Craig Hooper, were newer to hiking and hung back, joking about how the fog made everything feel like a scene out of a horror movie. "All right, folks," Mike called out, wiping a bead of moisture off his GPS screen. "Let's not get too spooked by this weather. Keep your focus on the trail. Nothing worse than losing your footing and taking a tumble down here." Jenny laughed nervously. "Yeah, nothing like a good old death drop to ruin a perfectly good outing." Craig smirked, shaking his head. "Mike, are you sure this is even the right trail? I mean, this looks way too quiet, like murder movie quiet." Mike ignored him and pressed on, but deep down even he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. Something about the atmosphere felt wrong. The usual calm of deep canyons seemed to have given way to an ominous weight, as though the mountains themselves were holding their breath. About an hour into their hike, the trio reached a narrow section of the trail that snaked down toward a dense cluster of trees. That's when the smell hit them. "God, what is that?" Jenny gagged, covering her nose with her jacket sleeve. "It's like something rotting." Mike paused, his eyes narrowing. "Could be a dead animal. Happens a lot out here. Coyotes, maybe." Craig winced. "That doesn't smell like a coyote. It smells worse. Way worse." The group hesitated for a moment, exchanging uneasy glances, but curiosity, that irresistible pull of discovery, won out. They followed the stench, which grew stronger with each step. By now, even Mike's bravado had started to waver. The trail led them to a jagged rock face peppered with dark crevices and crumbling edges. One particular gap, barely visible behind overgrown shrubs, seemed to beckon them with its gaping darkness. Mike hesitated, shining his flashlight into the void. "Stay back," he warned. "This could be dangerous." But Jenny peered over his shoulder, already clutching her phone like it was a talisman. "Mike, I think this is where the smell's coming from." Taking a deep breath, Mike crouched lower and pushed aside the branches. As his flashlight beam hesitantly swept the cavern floor, a shape began to materialize in the gloom. It was too still, too unnatural. "Oh my God," Jenny whispered, "is that—" "Yes," Mike's voice cracked. "It's a body." The three of them froze in horror. The remains lay partially obscured under a haphazard pile of leaves and dirt, like someone had tried to hide it but couldn't be bothered to finish the job properly. The smell of decay was almost unbearable now, thick and suffocating. Jenny stumbled backward, her face pale. "We need the police, right now!" Craig, normally the guy with a sarcastic comment ready for any situation, looked nauseous and stunned into silence. Mike's hands trembled as he dialed 911, keeping his eyes locked on the gruesome scene. The operator on the other end picked up quickly. 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Mike Thornton. We're in Deep Canyon, about 5 miles south of the Outlook Ridge trailhead. We just found—" He swallowed hard, his voice dropping nearly to a whisper. "We found a body, human. Looks like it's been here a while." The operator's calm tone steadied him slightly. "Understood, sir. Stay where you are. Do not disturb the scene. Authorities are en route. Can you ensure the area is safe for first responders?" Mike glanced warily at the cave entrance. "It's stable as far as I can tell, but my God, you better send them fast." The call ended. Silence returned, save for the faint rustling of leaves in the canyon wind. Nobody spoke as they waited. Jenny stood away from the mouth of the cavern, hugging her arms tightly as if to block out the cold or the terror, or both. Craig shifted nervously, gripping a hunting knife from his pack, half expecting something or someone to emerge from the shadows. Mike, meanwhile, couldn't stop staring into the cave. The scene haunted him. He couldn't help but notice the meticulous way the body had been concealed. This wasn't random, wasn't the work of the wilderness. This was something human. Someone had done this, deliberately, methodically. And as that thought took root in his mind, his unease deepened into dread. "Who would do something like this?" Jenny murmured, barely audible. Craig shook his head. "Someone who really wanted to hide something." The sound of sirens in the distance broke the oppressive stillness. In that moment Mike realized the discovery wasn't just a tragedy, it was the beginning of something darker, something bigger than any of them could have imagined. And so, as the first responders arrived, flashing lights cutting through the canyon fog, the hikers were left with the unsettling knowledge that they had stumbled upon the gateway to a nightmare. Following the initial leads. By the time Detective John Carter arrived at the remote crime scene, the sun had already begun to dip behind the jagged peaks of Deep Canyon, casting long shadows that made the place feel even more ominous. The faint metallic taste of fear hung in the cold mountain air, mingling with the sickly sweet stench of decay that lingered within the cavern's confines. Carter, a man who had seen his fair share of horrific scenes during his 15 years on the force in Colorado's rural regions, still felt the pit of nausea stir in his stomach as he crouched near the body. The flashlight in his gloved hand flickered slightly as he examined the leaves and dirt half covering the remains, meticulously documenting the evidence before him. Adult female, mid to late 50s, his partner, Detective Maria Haynes, muttered as she flipped open her notepad. Her voice was steady, but Carter caught the strain in her tone. Blunt force trauma to the skull maybe? Could be post-mortem damage, hard to tell with this level of decomposition. Got ligature marks here too, she added, pointing with her pen toward the faint, bruised indentations on the wrists. Carter grimaced. Someone tied her up. Haynes nodded, her jaw tightening. Looks like she's been here a while. Weeks, maybe months. She glanced around the cave's entrance, where crime scene technicians hovered, snapping photos and collecting soil samples. What I don't get is, why here? Why so deep into this godforsaken canyon? Isolation, Carter replied, standing and dusting off his knees. No one's supposed to come this far off the trail. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted her found, eventually, but not before it suited them. Haynes turned to one of the techs. Hey Becky, anything on the soil disturbance outside the entrance? The young forensics officer nodded, removing her gloves. Yeah, looks like some footprints just inside the cave are more recent than the others, maybe a few days old. Size 11 or 12, definitely a man's boot based on the tread depth. Nobody else here wears something that big. Carter exchanged a grim glance with Haynes. Great. So, someone was here recently, he muttered under his breath. Probably checking to see if his secret stash had been found yet. Back at the Evergreen Sheriff's office that night, Carter and Haynes hunkered down in the briefing room, where the town sheriff Al Wallace went over the preliminary findings with the rest of the squad. The walls of the room were covered with maps of Deep Canyon, pinned alongside a few hastily printed diagrams of the cavern system and the positioning of the body. This one's local, Donna Mitchell, Wallace began, his gruff voice cutting through the tension in the room. 58 years old. Her husband filed a missing person report 3 months ago, said he thought she'd walked out on him after an argument. Claimed she was tired of the same old small-town marriage and wanted to find herself. Except she didn't walk out, Carter said flatly, crossing his arms. She walked straight into whatever hellhole this bastard lured her to. Wallace ignored the interjection, flipping through his notes. We've reached out to the family for confirmation, but given what we found in the cave, specifically the wedding ring and those scraps of fabric matching the jacket she was last seen in, we're almost certain it's her. Haynes leaned forward, resting her elbows on the edge of the table. What about the rest of her family, besides her husband? Who else was close to her? Wallace frowned. 2 sons. The oldest, Mark Mitchell, runs a small landscaping business in town. The youngest, Ethan Mitchell, is... He hesitated, glancing at his notes again. Missing as of last month under pretty suspicious circumstances. No one's filed an official report, but some of the locals said they noticed he hadn't been around. So we've got a dead mother, a missing son, and an estranged husband who probably knows more than he's letting on, Carter summarized. Hell of a setup. You think Ethan's involved? Asked a young deputy, leaning back in his chair as he scribbled erratically in his own notepad. Carter shook his head. Could go either way. Missing doesn't necessarily mean guilty, but it's damn curious he vanished right after his mom. Either he skipped town out of fear, or someone made him disappear. There was a tense silence before Haynes spoke again. There's something else, she said carefully, tapping her pen on the edge of the table. Mitchell's sister-in-law, Samantha Calloway, came up during interviews with friends. Apparently there was a lot of drama between her and Donna over how Donna was planning to divide up the family estate. Word is, Donna wanted to leave most of it to Ethan, cutting out Samantha almost completely. Jesus, Wallace muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Estate disputes, familial grudges, this is turning into a soap opera. Not just a soap opera, a motive, Carter replied firmly. The next morning, armed with a few leads, Carter and Haynes drove out to the Mitchell residence. The old Victorian house sat on the edge of evergreen, bordered by towering pines and wrapped in an eerie, unnatural quiet. The home felt lifeless, as though its previous laughter and chaos had evaporated on the day Donna Mitchell disappeared. Her husband, Michael Mitchell, answered the door, his haggard face betraying too many sleepless nights and too much cheap bourbon. He eyed the detectives warily before motioning them inside. "She's gone, isn't she?" Michael asked quietly as he took a cigarette from a crumpled pack on the counter. Carter frowned. "We believe we've recovered Donna's remains, Mr. Mitchell, but we need your help filling in some blanks." "Blanks?" Michael repeated, glaring. "What kind of blanks? I've told you all 100 times Donna left home. She didn't disappear. She packed a bag, said she wanted space." "No one willingly disappears into a place like Deep Canyon," Haynes interjected gently. Michael slumped into his chair, dragging on his cigarette. "It wasn't me, all right. You're looking at me like I was the one who shoved her into that damn cave. I loved her, even when she didn't love me back." "Then help us," Carter pressed, leaning closer. "Who else had a reason to hurt her? Who hated her enough to do something like this?" After a long pause, Michael muttered under his breath. "Samantha, Donna's sister-in-law. Jesus, they hated each other's guts. Donna told me once she was rewriting the will to leave Samantha out completely. Said she didn't trust her." "Enough to kill?" Carter asked, his voice sharp. Michael hesitated, then extinguished his cigarette. "I don't know, but if Samantha knew Donna was changing that will, I wouldn't put it past her to flip out." Haynes exchanged a meaningful glance with Carter. That was the confirmation they needed. As they drove back to the station, the cold Colorado wind whipping against the car windows, Carter turned to Haynes. "This thing's barely started, but I've got a bad feeling it's about to get a whole lot worse." "Yeah," Haynes muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. "I don't think Donna Mitchell's the only blood on these hands." Suspicious evidence. It was a quiet morning at the Evergreen Police Department when Detective Maria Haynes walked into the evidence room, holding a fresh cup of black coffee and a stack of the forensic team's preliminary reports. Beside her, Detective John Carter, already on his second cup of the day, leaned against the edge of the wide oak table littered with photographs from the Deep Canyon crime scene. "All right, what have we got?" Carter asked, his voice gruff as he rubbed his temples. "Plenty," Haynes replied, plopping the files down on the table with an audible thud before taking a seat across from him. "None of it good." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Sounds promising. Lay it on me." Haynes opened the top file, sliding some photographs across the table. "So, the technicians went through everything we flagged at the scene. Footprints, blood splatter, that weird layering of dirt around the body." Her finger hovered over a particularly close-up shot of a boot print. The footprints, are the most telling. Whoever this guy is, he didn't exactly tiptoe around." Carter squinted at the photo, noting the deep, distinct tread of the boot. "Men's size 11, he muttered, more to himself than Haynes. "Any matches with the shoe brands?" "Becky in forensics thinks it could be a standard model hiking boot. They're common, sold just about anywhere you can find an outdoor shop. But here's what's interesting." Haynes leaned closer to Carter, lowering her voice slightly. "These prints were way too fresh to belong to anyone other than the perp. The soil's damp, and based on the temperature and recent rain patterns, we're talking maybe 3-4 days tops." "Shit," Carter breathed, sitting straighter. "So after killing her he went back. Why? Guilt? Double-checking to make sure no one found the body?" Haynes shook her head. "Could have been anything but guilt? Nah, I don't buy it. A guy who dumps a woman like trash under some leaves doesn't have a conscience. This was calculated. The body being there months and he's poking around a week ago." Carter tapped the photograph for emphasis. "It means he's still in the area. He's not done." Haynes nodded silently as Carter's words hung heavy between them. A knock on the door dragged them back into the present. The young forensics officer, Becky Roth, pushed her way in, carrying a laptop and a clear evidence bag. "Hey detectives," Becky greeted, her energy clashing with the grim mood. "Got something that might interest you." "Better not be more bad news," Carter retorted, gesturing toward a chair. "What have you got?" Becky pulled out her laptop, placing it on the table before she sat down. She clicked through several folders until she brought up something that made Haynes lean forward curiously. "DNA results came through," Becky began, her tone serious now. "The blood near the cave entrance that you guys flagged, it matches the victim." "So, Donna Mitchell was alive when she was brought to the canyon?" Haynes asked, the implication spinning rapidly in her mind. "Looks like it," Becky said, her face grim. She was injured, possibly restrained at some point based on the ligature marks on her wrists, but that's not all. She slid the clear evidence bag across the table, inside of which was a muddy scrap of fabric. This was found just outside the deeper section of the cave, caught on some sharp rocks. It's synthetic, patterned, and looks like it came from clothing. Haynes lifted the evidence bag, bringing it closer into view. This pattern, it's floral. Bingo, Becky said. Check this out. She swiped on her laptop screen, pulling up an image of Donna Mitchell smiling in a faded photograph. Her oversized windbreaker, though slightly outdated in style, featured the same floral pattern visible in the fabric scrap. Her jacket, Carter said immediately, his jaw tightening. That's what we think, Becky agreed. The piece was torn off, likely during some kind of struggle near the entrance before whatever happened inside the cave. Haynes frowned deeply, her mind racing. So, we've got fresh footprints from a man who came back days ago, Donna's blood near the entrance and signs of a struggle. Then he drags or forces her further inside. That's what it's looking like, Becky confirmed. But there's one more thing. She pointed to another image on her screen, this one of thick dirt stains and an indentation near where the body had been buried. The soil around her wasn't just disturbed, it was mixed, like someone had deliberately packed it down to help mask her scent or make sure animals didn't dig her up. Carter scoffed, pushing the photo away. That's amateur hour. He's careful enough to pick a place no one will stumble across for months but doesn't know enough to actually hide her properly. People make mistakes when they're rushed, Haynes countered, her voice focused. She glanced at Becky. Anything else? Becky paused. One more thing, but it's a little unusual. She reached back into her evidence bag and pulled out a small metallic object, placing it carefully on the table. We found this about 15 feet from the body. Carter frowned as he leaned closer, inspecting the twisted hunk of metal. A belt buckle? More like part of one, Becky clarified. Take a look at the initials etched on this corner, here. Using a penlight, she illuminated the faint engraving. CM. CM? Haynes repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's not Donna's initials. No, it's not, Becky agreed. Could belong to whoever caused this mess, though. Only question is, how did the buckle break? Either he got into a fight or it snapped while he was hauling the body. Carter swore under his breath. Everything about this screams rushed. Haynes jotted down the initials in her notepad before looking back at Becky. This metallic buckle, it's been processed for prints, right? Already in the lab, Becky assured them. But don't hold your breath. Between the dirt and time exposure, I wouldn't expect anything clean. By the time Becky left the room, Haynes and Carter were left in a storm of theories. Carter paced the cramped office while Haynes flipped through photograph after photograph, her mind compartmentalizing the puzzle. Okay, she declared, breaking the silence. Fresh footprints, fresh soil disturbance, a torn floral jacket, mixed blood patterns, and a damn belt buckle with CM on it. Means we're dealing with one perp, maybe two, Carter interjected. Someone strong enough to drag her into that cave but sloppy enough to leave their handiwork all over the place. Do we check her husband first? Haynes asked. Or focus on these initials? Carter stopped pacing, turning to face Haynes. We check everything. He reached for his coffee, downing the cold swig before setting it firmly on the table. His gray eyes carried the glint of a man on edge but determined. Let's find this son of a bitch before he leaves any more initials for us to clean up. The connection between the victim and the missing person detective Maria Haynes sat across the long, cluttered conference table, scrolling through the background reports on Donna Mitchell and Ethan Mitchell. The glow of her laptop screen flickered against the increasingly dim afternoon light that streamed through the partially covered windows of the Evergreen Sheriff's Office. Detective John Carter, with his usual air of quiet pragmatism, leaned back in his chair, tracing the rim of his coffee mug with his finger. We're looking at two connected cases here, Haynes began, her voice heavy with certainty. Donna Mitchell, confirmed dead, and her youngest son Ethan, missing for over a month. Combine that with family tensions, financial disputes, and a little small-town flair for drama. You've got all the ingredients for one hell of a mess. Carter nodded slowly. All right, let's start with Donna. What do we know about her in the months leading up to her disappearance? Haynes pulled out a stack of notes, tapping the edges to straighten them. Donna Mitchell was a retired high school teacher, known around Evergreen for being friendly, almost to a fault, and deeply invested in her family. But from what friends and neighbors said, things started getting strained a few months back. A lot of fights at the house, loud enough that a couple of neighbors called the cops. Domestic disturbances? Carter asked, narrowing his eyes. Not exactly, Haynes replied. No reports ever got filed, just nosy neighbors saying they heard shouting, but here's the kicker, it wasn't with her husband Michael. Most of the yelling matches were between Donna and her youngest son, Ethan. Carter perked up, leaning forward. What could a 58-year-old schoolteacher have to fight about with her 20-something son? Ethan Mitchell wasn't exactly walking the straight and narrow, Haynes explained, pulling another file from the stack. He'd been arrested twice, one for public intoxication, the other for possession of a controlled substance. A few minor theft complaints filed against him too. Carter let out a low whistle. Let me guess, Donna was tired of bailing him out? That's what it sounds like. According to Donna's friends, she was trying to push Ethan to turn his life around. He lived with her on and off, but it was a love-hate relationship. Add in some rumors that Ethan had a falling out with his older brother Mark over some inheritance talk, and you've got even more tension. What kind of inheritance talk? Carter pressed, his tone turning sharper. Does this tie into Donna's estate? Haynes flipped through her notes briskly. It does. Donna was worth a decent chunk. Between a life insurance policy, the house, and her pension, we're talking 6 figures, give or take. She'd been reviewing her will, making plans to cut certain people out. That certain someone being Ethan? Carter asked, raising an eyebrow. No, Haynes replied quickly. Not Ethan. Samantha Calloway, Donna's sister-in-law. According to one of Donna's best friends, Sophie Granger, Donna was planning to leave most of the estate to Ethan, despite his issues. She said it was her way of giving him a fresh start, but Samantha? She was going to be removed completely. Carter exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. So, Donna and Ethan had their share of fights, but at the end of the day, she still wanted to take care of him. Seemed that way, Haynes agreed. But Samantha? That's where things get interesting. Later that evening, Haynes and Carter sat in the sheriff's office interrogation room with Michael Mitchell, Donna's husband. Michael looked tired, his face pale, his hand shaking slightly as he cradled a disposable styrofoam coffee cup. Carter wasn't sure if the trembling was from nerves, guilt, or his apparent over-reliance on cheap whiskey. You told us Donna and Ethan didn't get along, Carter began bluntly. Any idea why? Michael hesitated for a long moment, staring at the table as if searching for the right words. Ethan's always been a troublemaker. Donna tried to fix him, but you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. Was he violent? Haynes asked, her voice careful but direct. Michael shook his head. No, not to her, not physically at least, but emotionally? He sighed heavily and rubbed his temples. Ethan knew how to hurt her. He promised to get clean so many times just to break that promise over and over. Donna believed in him no matter what. It damn near broke her. And what about Samantha? Carter interjected, steering the conversation. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just slightly. What was her deal with Donna? Michael stiffened slightly at the name. Samantha's always been manipulative. She's Donna's sister-in-law, but they never got along. Donna always said Samantha was after her money, would do anything to get a piece of it. She didn't trust her, not one bit. You ever see Samantha and Ethan together? Haynes asked suddenly, her tone sharp. Michael hesitated again, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Maybe once or twice. They weren't close, but Ethan, he'd sometimes take her side when Donna was arguing with her, said Donna was selfish, holding on to the family stuff like it meant something. And now Donna's gone, and so is Ethan, Carter stated coldly. You see where we're going with this? Michael's head shot up abruptly, his eyes brimming with frustration. I didn't hurt my wife, and I don't know where Ethan is. I lost them both, okay? Samantha's the snake in all this. Donna wanted her out of the will, and now she's gone? That's no damn coincidence. When Michael left the room, Haynes and Carter sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the case pressing down on them like the Colorado peaks outside their window. So Donna was trying to help Ethan even when he didn't deserve it. But he vanishes right after she changes her will in his favor? Haynes mused. Feels like there's more to Ethan Mitchell than meets the eye. Maybe, Carter replied, frowning thoughtfully. Or maybe Samantha felt cornered, saw her golden ticket slipping away and decided to slip into something more deadly. Haynes nodded, staring hard at the notes in front of her. If Samantha and Ethan were somehow tied up in this together and something went wrong, maybe Donna wasn't the only person on her hit list. And if Ethan's disappearance isn't voluntary, Carter murmured grimly, then we might not just be hunting for a killer. We might be looking for a second victim. The devious sister-in-law. The name Samantha Calloway had come up more often than either Detective John Carter or Maria Haynes felt comfortable ignoring. Sitting in the brightly lit conference room, the two detectives sifted through Samantha's file, a stack of paperwork detailing her questionable financial dealings, tumultuous relationships, and most recently, her proximity to the Mitchell family drama. Carter leaned back in his chair, flipping through a page with a skeptical frown. "You know," he began, his southern twang kicking in just enough to emphasize his disbelief, "every time we dig deeper into these family dynamics, this Samantha character smells worse than a 2-day-old trout." "She's definitely got skeletons," Haynes replied, skimming Samantha's profile on her laptop. Her voice was measured but tinged with frustration. "She declared bankruptcy 3 years ago, got caught up in some shady real estate scams, and somehow managed to weasel her way into another cushy situation with her brother-in-law's family. She's broke, she's bitter, and she's attached to a family sitting on a fat inheritance," Carter said, tossing the file onto the table. "If that's not motive, I don't know what is." Haynes nodded, her eyes narrowing as she clicked over to another screen. "It gets worse. I found 3 separate credit card lawsuits against her from different creditors. This woman's been drowning in debt for years, and from the looks of it she's got no way out, except maybe a big payday." Carter gave a low whistle. "So Donna cuts her out of the will, and what? Samantha decides to take matters into her own hands?" "Looks like it," Haynes agreed, leaning in with a serious expression. "But then there's this. We've got reports from a neighbor who claims they saw Samantha and Caleb, Ethan's best friend, arguing outside of Deep Canyon about 2 weeks before Donna disappeared. The same neighbor overheard Samantha saying something about not wanting it to happen this way." Carter tilted his head. "Caleb? The guy Donna told people she never liked? The one who always seemed to be getting Ethan into trouble?" "That Caleb," Haynes confirmed. "He's in this more than we thought, and he's got a history. 1 count of assault 3 years ago, dismissal for lack of evidence, and a reputation for being the shady guy in town that no one wants around their kids." "Great," Carter muttered, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "So now we've got a financially desperate sister-in-law and a violent wildcard buddy. That's starting to look a whole lot like an unholy duo." Later that afternoon, the detectives paid a visit to Samantha at her modest downtown apartment. The building was old and a little dilapidated, with peeling paint and a rickety staircase that groaned under every step. Samantha lived on the 2nd floor, and when she finally opened her door, her appearance told a story of its own. Perfectly done blonde hair, a designer blouse that she probably couldn't afford, and a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, this is unexpected," Samantha said smoothly, folding her manicured hands over the doorframe. "What can I do for Evergreen's finest?" Carter wasn't interested in pleasantries. "We're investigating Donna Mitchell's death, and your name keeps coming up. Thought we'd cut out the middleman and hear what you have to say about it." Samantha's expression twisted, just for a fraction of a second, before she replaced it with a mask of mock concern. "Donna's death is heartbreaking," she said slowly, her voice dripping with insincerity, "but I don't know what you think I have to do with it." Haynes stepped forward, her eyes locked onto Samantha's. "Funny thing is, we have more than just a feeling. We've got people putting you near Deep Canyon not long before her disappearance. You might want to start explaining." Samantha's smile grew tighter. "I was out hiking, like a lot of people in this town. That's no crime, is it?" "Hiking with Caleb?" Haynes shot back. Samantha froze for just a beat too long, her pupils dilating slightly. "What are you talking about?" "You and Caleb Reynolds," Carter said, his tone razor-sharp. "Neighbors saw you two arguing out by the canyon, something about not wanting it to happen this way. Ring any bells?" The careful veneer Samantha had been putting on started to crack. Her lips parted slightly, but instead of answering, she leaned back into the doorway, crossing her arms defensively. "Look," Samantha started, her voice tense. "I don't know what Caleb's been saying, but he was the one who came to me, asking for money, asking for help. He said Ethan was spiraling, and Donna wasn't doing anything about it. I told him to mind his own damn business." "You're telling us Caleb dragged you into this little family mess and you just walked away?" Haynes pressed, her brows raised in disbelief. "Yes," Samantha snapped, her voice growing louder. "Believe it or not, I wanted nothing to do with the Mitchells' dysfunction. Donna and I didn't get along, sure, but I wouldn't kill her. That's ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" Carter said, leaning closer, his voice calm but loaded with accusation. "Like leaving your entire financial future riding on the hopes of Donna's inheritance, or suddenly getting cut out and having your golden ticket slip through your fingers." Samantha's face flushed a deep crimson. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but no sound came out. Instead, after a moment, she hissed through gritted teeth. "I had nothing to do with Donna's death, and if you think I did, then you're looking at the wrong person." "Maybe we are," Carter said, stepping back. "But you'll understand if we keep looking." Back at the station, Carter tossed his notebook onto the desk and sighed heavily. She's hiding something. Oh, no doubt, Haynes agreed, sipping on her now lukewarm coffee. But the question is whether she's hiding incriminating evidence or just her natural ability to be the most unlikable person in any room. You think she's our mastermind? Carter asked, his tone laced with grim curiosity. Could be, Haynes replied thoughtfully. But Caleb's involvement changes the equation. She's manipulative, sure, but she'd need someone willing to get their hands dirty if this thing went south. A killer for hire doesn't make much sense unless she's got the cash to pay for one, and judging by her bank statements, she's not exactly loaded, Carter pointed out. No, but she's desperate, Haynes countered. And desperate people make terrible decisions. Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression dark. That much we can count on. Theories behind the motive for the crime detective. Maria Haynes tapped her pen rhythmically against the edge of the conference table as she sifted through the mountain of reports, photos, and handwritten notes sprawled in front of her. Across from her, John Carter stared at the whiteboard they had pinned with evidence and theories. Scribbled timelines, photographs of Donna Mitchell and Ethan Mitchell, and lists of suspects dominated the board. At the very center, Samantha Calloway's name was encircled in red, with a question mark looming next to it. All right, Haynes started, her tone weighed down by exhaustion but sharpened by determination. Let's lay this out. Donna Mitchell is dead. Ethan Mitchell is missing, possibly dead too, and Samantha is clearly up to her neck in this mess. She leaned back in her chair, fidgeting with the pen. The million-dollar question now is, what the hell was the motive? Carter tilted his chair back slightly, the creak of the metal frame breaking the silence. Money, he grunted, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Yeah, Haynes nodded, but let's not act like this is just some run-of-the-mill robbery gone sideways. This is complicated, messy. Samantha's financially desperate, sure, but how does that desperation lead to a premeditated murder of her sister-in-law? Because that's what this was. Planned. Carter threw her a skeptical glance. Desperation makes killers out of people who might have otherwise just been miserable. Samantha had everything to gain if Donna wasn't around. The estate, the life insurance. Let's not kid ourselves here. That amounts to what, 6 figures? Enough to dig her out of the hole she's in. Fair, Haynes conceded. But if it's just the money, why involve Caleb? A guy like him doesn't exactly scream trustworthy accomplice. She leaned forward and circled Caleb's name on her notes. She had to know that bringing him into this would add more chaos to an already risky plan. Maybe because she didn't want blood on her perfectly manicured hands, Carter suggested, his voice low. He pointed at the timeline next to Caleb's photo. The guy's got a rap sheet. She figures he'll do the dirty work for her, make it look like some random act of violence, and she gets her payday. Or, Haynes countered, raising a finger, it wasn't just about the money. What if this was personal? Carter raised an eyebrow, gesturing for her to elaborate. Think about the timing, Haynes continued. She flipped through her notes and held up a witness statement. Donna was rewriting her will. It wasn't just about cutting Samantha out, it was about giving everything to Ethan. She paused for emphasis. Everything, John. Carter let out a whistle. Shit, that does complicate things. Exactly, Haynes said, leaning forward. Donna's decision pushed all the wrong buttons. Samantha's not just losing money, she's being erased. And worse, Ethan, the family screw-up, is getting it all. That's a humiliation Samantha Calloway can't live with. Humiliation, Carter mused, mulling over the word. I get it. But you're assuming Samantha's got enough of an ego to kill over pride. She does, Haynes replied firmly. Every report we've gone through screams it, entitlement. That's her M. Oh, as far as she's concerned, Donna's assets were hers by default. And Ethan? He's not her blood. That inheritance was like watching a lottery ticket float away. Carter grunted in agreement, but still frowned slightly. Then there's Ethan disappearing, he added, rubbing the back of his neck. If she wanted Donna dead just to cash out, why take Ethan off the board too? He's not in her way, he's part of her payday. That's the part that doesn't add up, Haynes admitted. Unless she saw Ethan as a liability. Carter narrowed his eyes in curiosity. A liability? Think about it, Haynes said, her voice picking up speed. Donna's dead. Samantha knows eventually Ethan's going to come sniffing around for that estate money. What if she thought Ethan would start pointing fingers at her? Or worse, what if she and Ethan were in on it together and something went south? Jesus, Carter muttered, leaning forward and scrubbing a hand over his face. If that's true, if she and Ethan cooked this up together, then his disappearance might not be her fault at all. Somebody else could have stepped in. Like Caleb, Haynes said, locking eyes with him. The room fell silent for a moment. Carter shrugged, breaking the silence. Could explain why that jackass was seen with Samantha near Deep Canyon. Maybe Caleb and Ethan tried to pull something on Samantha and she flipped the script. You know the saying, no honor among thieves. Still, Haynes pressed, her brow furrowed. Why go through all of this? Why be sloppy? If Samantha's as calculating as we think, she'd have played this smarter. She wouldn't have left Donna half buried in a cave or involved Caleb of all people. Unless, Carter said, holding up a hand, this wasn't her first plan. Something forced her hand. Haynes blinked, her interest piqued. Go on? Maybe Donna found out what was brewing, Carter explained, walking over to the whiteboard and gesturing to a photo of Donna with her sons. Donna might have figured out that Samantha was sniffing around for her will, or that Caleb was hanging around Ethan for all the wrong reasons. She could have confronted them. Hell, maybe Donna was the one who pushed back first and Samantha panicked. Haynes tapped her pen on the table, thinking it through. So now we're looking at a motive born out of panic, entitlement, or a mixture of both. Still doesn't answer all of it, but... She trailed off, eyes flicking toward the scattered evidence photos. It fits the psychology. Fits Samantha's psychology, Carter corrected. He grabbed a marker and drew a messy arrow bridging Samantha and Caleb's names. But if Caleb's our wild card and Ethan was caught in the crossfire, then Samantha's the linchpin. The motive rises or falls on her. Haynes stood, pushing back her chair and crossing her arms. She glanced between the board and Carter. Okay, so, we've got motive, greed, personal humiliation, fear, and we've got a prime suspect. But we don't have a trigger. Carter cocked his head. The trigger being? What set all of this off? Haynes clarified. What made Samantha go from bitter sister-in-law to full-blown killer? Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at Samantha's name, his jaw tightening. Finally, he said, let's find out. The second body found the call came in just after 7 a.m. on a brisk Thursday morning. Detective John Carter was nursing a steaming cup of coffee in the station's break room, while Mariah Haynes hovered over her desk, engrossed in a report about financial records that tied Samantha Calloway to Caleb Reynolds. Both detectives bolted upright when the hurried voice of Officer Daniels crackled over the police radio. Dispatch to Detective Carter. Possible crime scene reported 5 miles southeast of the Deep Canyon site. Hikers found a body, male. Description matches Ethan Mitchell, requesting immediate response. Over. Carter froze for a split second, the weight of the news crashing over him like ice water. Without hesitation, he sprang into action, coffee forgotten, and gestured to Haynes. Let's go. You think it's Ethan? Haynes asked as she grabbed her jacket, her tone landing somewhere between professional calm and deeply unsettled. Better hope it's not, Carter muttered grimly. But knowing our luck... The dirt road leading to the site was rugged, winding through a dense forest draped in morning mist. The soft hum of their cruiser's engine was punctuated only by the crunch of gravel underneath and the occasional distant caw of a raven. Haynes stared out the passenger window, her fingers thrumming against her knee as she tried to prepare herself for what they might find. This fits, she said abruptly, breaking the silence. What fits? Carter asked, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. This. Ethan showing up dead. If Donna's murder had a personal motive, Ethan was either a loose end or part of whatever scheme got her killed. She turned to face Carter, her eyes sharp. If this is him, it means our perp is trying to clean house. Carter grunted, his jaw tightening. Or it means Ethan was more involved than we thought, and it caught up to him. They arrived at the scene moments later, parking just outside a taped-off area where several patrol officers and forensic techs were already working. The forest was eerily quiet save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the cold wind. A deep gorge loomed nearby, and Carter couldn't help but notice how the jagged rocks and steep drop mirrored the grim nature of their case. Officer Daniels greeted them with a grim nod as they approached. Hikers called it in about an hour ago, he said, leading them toward the body. They were following the creek trail and spotted the remains just off the path in some underbrush. From the looks of it, it's been here a couple days at least, but not much longer. Haynes knelt down as they reached the scene. The body was partially obscured by fallen leaves, the forest floor damp with dew. A man, early 20s, with sandy brown hair and a heavy leather jacket. The bruising around his neck left little doubt about the cause of death. Strangulation. It's him, Haynes said quietly, studying the victim's face. Although pale and lifeless, there was no mistaking the resemblance to Donna Mitchell. Ethan. Damn it, Carter muttered, crouching beside her. His brow furrowed as he scrutinized the scene. Bound by rope before he was dumped here. See these ligature marks? Same setup as Donna. Well, almost. This is sloppier. Whoever did this didn't care about hiding the body. Haynes observed, her voice tight. Or didn't have time. One of the crime scene techs, a wiry young man with thick glasses, stepped forward while holding a bagged piece of evidence. "Detectives, this was found a few feet from the body," he said, holding up a tattered piece of cloth. "Looks like part of a shirt. Dark, synthetic, but torn." Carter snatched the evidence bag and examined it closely. "This tear looks violent, like a struggle." Haynes stood and surveyed the surrounding forest, taking in the chaotic scene. This wasn't planned, or if it was, something went sideways here. "Guilt? Revenge?" Carter muttered, mostly to himself. "Or someone cleaning up a mistake." A junior officer approached from the direction of the creek, his face pale. "Detectives, we found tire tracks about 50 yards out from here. Looks like someone backed a vehicle in, likely to dump the body. They're faint, maybe 2 or 3 days old. Should we call for a mold?" "Hell yes," Carter said, straightening up. He nodded toward the junior officer. "Get the lab techs on it. I want measurements, treads, the whole 9 yards." As the forensics team began collecting more evidence, Carter and Haynes stepped aside, their voices low as they pieced together what they knew. "This feels rushed," Haynes said, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Donna's body was hidden in that cave for months, carefully concealed. But Ethan, tossed out here like yesterday's trash. Something's different." "Maybe this time it's personal," Carter offered, staring down at the muddy ground. "Samantha's manipulative, sure, but this doesn't scream calculated, this screams panic." "Could be Caleb," Haynes added, the possibility thick in her voice. "He's got the temper for something like this. Maybe Ethan confronted him about Donna, or maybe Ethan was threatening to talk, and Caleb lost it." Carter frowned. "Or maybe Samantha had a falling out with her hired muscle. You trust a snake like Caleb to keep quiet, eventually it bites you back." "Which would mean Samantha cut him loose," Haynes said, her voice trailing off as she connected the dots in her head. "She's tying up loose ends, or he is, or both," Carter said grimly. The ride back to the station was subdued, both detectives lost in their thoughts as they processed the brutal connection between Donna's death and Ethan's. "You think he was innocent?" Haynes asked suddenly, surprising Carter. "Innocent?" Carter repeated, giving her a sidelong glance. "The kid was a screw-up, no doubt, but innocent? I don't know, everyone in this mess looks guilty to me." Haynes stared ahead, her expression somber. "You think Samantha's behind all of it?" "She's the common thread," Carter replied. "The cash-strapped sister-in-law with everything to gain by getting Donna and Ethan out of the way. 2 murders, 1 inheritance. It tracks." "But it's sloppy," Haynes countered. "If she was as smart as we think, she wouldn't leave Ethan here like that. This feels like the work of someone who's lost control." "Like Caleb," Carter said, his voice firm. "And if he's gone rogue, that means Samantha should be scared right about now." "And scared people make mistakes," Haynes added, her eyes narrowing, "which might be exactly what we need." Carter nodded slowly, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Let's hope she makes them soon, because whoever's the mastermind behind this has blood on their hands, and I don't think they're finished yet." Fear spreads across Evergreen. The cold wind swept through the quiet streets of Evergreen, rattling the storefront signs and dead autumn leaves that had gathered in the gutters. What was once a picturesque, tight-knit town nestled in the heart of Colorado was now cloaked in unease. Normally the town would be bustling this time of year, locals sipping coffee at the corner cafe, hikers stocking up on gear for a trek into Deep Canyon, kids laughing their way home from school. But now, the streets felt empty, as though everyone in Evergreen had collectively decided it was safer to stay behind locked doors. Evergreen had seen its share of hardships over the years, forest fires, harsh winters, but not this. Not cold-blooded murder. And now, with 2 deaths, both tied to established members of the community who were loved, or at least known, by nearly everyone, the tension had become palpable. Detective Maria Haynes sat in the driver's seat of an unmarked police cruiser, parked just outside the town's main diner. She watched as a few locals came and went, their heads swiveling nervously, their smiles forced and short. The usual easy camaraderie that defined Evergreen had been replaced by cold suspicion. "Nobody trusts anyone," she said aloud, shaking her head. "Would you, if you didn't know the next victim wouldn't be you?" Carter replied, leaning back in the passenger seat and nursing what could only be described as dangerously stale coffee from the diner. "They've got every reason to be scared, Maria. 2 dead, 1 dumped in a cave, the other left in a forest like garbage. And the killers, or killer, are still out there." Haynes sighed, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. "It's more than fear, Carter. It's paranoia. You hear it, don't you? People talking about how it had to be someone in town. I stopped by that farmer's market yesterday and all anyone could do was speculate. Every neighbor has turned into a suspect. Samantha, Caleb. Hell, now I'm hearing whispers about the Mitchell's older son, Mark. Everyone's guilty when you don't know who to blame. Carter glanced out through the fogged window, watching an elderly woman hold her purse a little too tightly as she passed a group of teenagers talking on the corner. Even casual chatter looked suspicious in the current climate. Nothing spreads faster than a good murder, Carter muttered, throwing the half-empty coffee cup into the back seat. Folks in a place like Evergreen, they don't know how to handle the idea that someone they've known for years, someone they've exchanged pleasantries with at church or had over for barbecues, might be a killer. It eats at them. Turns everyone into a damn suspect in their own minds. Haynes leaned her head back against the seat, staring at the ceiling of the car. We're not helping either. The more this case drags on without an arrest, the worse it gets. The Mitchells were a prominent family, John. Donna was practically royalty around here, a freaking beloved schoolteacher. People need answers, and we're not giving them any. And until we do, Carter said grimly, fear starts doing our job for us. Inside the police station minutes later, the tension was no better. A long line of residents had gathered, some to report suspicious behaviors, others to voice their complaints directly to the police about the lack of progress on the case. Officer Daniels stood behind the front desk, trying and failing to calm a particularly agitated man wearing a flannel jacket. "Look!" the man huffed, his voice loud enough to carry across the room. "I don't care what you're investigating. How hard is it to make a damn arrest, huh? What kind of department are you running here? My kids are scared to walk home because Donna Mitchell's murderer's out there, and all we get from you is, we're working on it? It's pathetic." Daniels shifted uncomfortably, glancing over at Haynes and Carter as they walked in. He raised a hand in desperation, gesturing for backup. Carter sighed. "And now we're the department punching bags." Haynes walked up to the man, her expression calm but her tone firm. "Sir, I understand how you feel, but yelling at Officer Daniels isn't going to speed up our investigation." "And what is?" the man snapped back, his face flushed with frustration. "Because from where I'm standing, you're spinning your wheels while we're the ones living in fear day after day." Haynes didn't waver. "We're following every lead we have, but this isn't an open and shut case. If you want us to rush it, we'll miss something. And I guarantee you, when we do make an arrest, you'll want it to stick, right? You don't want us losing the killer on a technicality." The man glanced down, his breath heavy, before muttering, "Yeah, well, just hurry up." As he stormed out of the station, Haynes looked back at Carter. "It's bad out there, John. Really bad." "No kidding," he muttered, looking toward the bulletin board on the side wall where clippings from the local papers were pinned. Bold headlines practically screamed, "Double homicide still unsolved, killer on the loose in Evergreen." Below it someone had scrawled, "Who's next?" in red marker, a rude reminder of the ticking clock the police were racing against. "So what do we do?" Haynes asked, crossing her arms. "Because if we don't put someone in cuffs soon, we're going to have a damn riot on our hands." "Well, we do what we've always done," Carter replied, his voice flat but steady as he tightened the badge clipped to his belt. "We keep going, we dig harder, and we find something, anything, that cracks this wide open." That night, as rain pattered softly against the office windows, the tension didn't lessen. The desks were unusually quiet for such a small department. Even the junior officers weren't joking around like they usually did. Almost everyone in Evergreen knew someone who'd been close to Donna or Ethan. For many of them, it wasn't just a case, it was personal. Haynes sat alone at the evidence board, staring at the chaotic rainbow of strings, tacks, and names. Samantha Calloway, Caleb Reynolds, Donna Mitchell, Ethan Mitchell, Mark Mitchell, alibis, bank records, witness reports. Every piece of evidence stared back at her, daring her to connect them all into a coherent picture. Carter walked in a moment later, tossing a folder on her desk. "Got something," he said. "Call from one of Caleb's old friends. Guy's too scared to talk on record, but he says Caleb mentioned a big payday coming soon a month back." Haynes frowned. "Big payday? When?" Carter shrugged. "Right before Donna went missing." Haynes leaned forward, her mind racing. "You think this was all just for money?" Carter hesitated. "No, I think money started it. But when people like Caleb and Samantha get involved, it's never just about the money." He plunked another folder on the table. "Let's hope we figure out what else it was about before Evergreen burns itself down." Haynes stared at the board, Carter's words echoing in her ears. The town wasn't just afraid, it was unraveling, and the longer this dragged on, the closer Evergreen came to breaking completely. Samantha and Caleb on the run. The evidence was solidifying like a net tightening around Samantha Calloway and Caleb Reynolds. Financial records, eyewitness accounts, and forensic data painted an incriminating picture. The duo's blatant lies during questioning now stuck out like sore thumbs. Yet, just as it seemed the detectives were ready to make their move, Samantha and Caleb vanished. Detective Maria Haynes sat slumped at her desk, spinning a ballpoint pen between her fingers, the dark circles under her eyes a testament to the days of pressure building on the team. John Carter leaned against the doorframe of the cluttered office, his jaw flexing in frustration as he punched the corner of a wall in a rare outburst. "They didn't just vanish, John," Haynes snapped, breaking the silence. "They planned for this. Look at Samantha's history. She may be messy, but she's not stupid. And Caleb, he's got street smarts, a survival instinct." She groaned as she clicked through surveillance footage of Evergreen's quiet streets, again and again finding no trace. "They're out there somewhere. Together." "Damn right they are," Carter muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. His normally stoic demeanor was cracking. "And we handed it to them by waiting too damn long. That warrant should have gone through days ago, Maria. Days." "We didn't have enough to hold either of them," Haynes shot back defensively. "The DA wanted cleaner proof, remember? That's what we get for playing it cautious. Now we've got nothing but an APB and a shrinking trail." Carter inhaled sharply and crossed his arms, staring out the office window into the fading light. "This wasn't a panic move," he said. "This was premeditated. Samantha had them both packed and ready. She knew we were circling. Hell, they had a head start on us before we even realized they were gone." The vanishing act. The moment the disappearance was confirmed, Evergreen's police department sprang into action. Witnesses swore they saw Caleb's weathered pickup truck heading south toward I-70 late the previous night. 2 hours later, it was found abandoned at a rest stop near the foothills of the Rockies. Forensics came up empty, a wiped-down interior and minimal trace evidence. "Damn it," Carter hissed as he stood in the cold, his breath misting in the early morning air. He surveyed the scene while Haynes crouched, flashlight in hand, scanning the gravel near the tires. "Nothing?" she asked flatly. "Nothing," he barked. "Not so much as a used tissue." Haynes stood, rubbing her arms against the chill. "They're smart, too damn smart, and they didn't just ditch the truck, they had a plan after this." "We're dealing with two different philosophies here," Carter said, pacing. "Samantha's calculating, tactical. She doesn't move without a fallback plan. Caleb's impulsive, emotional. What do you think that mix breeds?" "Danger," Haynes replied, her tone cold as she pocketed her flashlight. "Pure, unpredictable danger." The stress simmering between them weighed heavy but functional. They both knew time was working against them. Each mile Samantha and Caleb got away shrank their chances of ending this without another body piling up. The mastermind and the muscle. Over the next 24 hours, missing person reports turned into a statewide fugitive hunt. Samantha and Caleb didn't just disappear from Evergreen, they disappeared into the wilderness outside Denver, as if the hills had swallowed them whole. Rumors began swirling, fueled by paranoia gripping the town. Some locals claimed Caleb had family hiding them, while others believed Samantha had bribed her way out of trouble. Neither theory satisfied Carter and Haynes. "Samantha is the brains," Haynes muttered during one late-night briefing at the sheriff's office. The room had gone still as she gestured toward a series of notes pinned to the bulletin board. "Look at how she spun every part of this. She's evaded creditors for years, talked her way out of business lawsuits, and conned her way into Donna's family fortune. You think fleeing the cops is too big for her? It's on brand." Carter cut in sharply, pointing at a grainy camera still of Caleb standing outside a gas station 2 counties away. "Fine, Maria, I'll buy that Samantha's masterminding it, but this guy, Caleb, he's the wild card. The guy's walking adrenaline. You think he's gonna sit in a corner and quietly run along with her plan forever? No, one bad argument, one slip-up, and Samantha's getting thrown under the bus, or worse. And you think Caleb's dumb enough to take her down?" Haynes arched an eyebrow. "I think Caleb does whatever the hell the moment tells him to do," Carter snapped, pacing in front of the crime board. "And I'm not willing to find out whether Samantha's smart enough to keep him calm. You remember the mugshot from his last assault charge? That look in his eyes? I'll bet you anything Ethan saw that same look before things went sideways. Pressure mounts." The next morning, dispatch got a hit. A clerk working the graveyard shift at a cheap roadside motel reported 2 individuals matching Samantha and Caleb's photos, checking into a room under fake names. By the time authorities arrived, the room was empty. On the table, an untouched takeout meal sat beside a map of northern Nevada, with several routes marked in bright red. "They're spooked," Haynes whispered, staring at the map. "Not spooked," Carter corrected, his eyes sharp. "They're adjusting. That red route doesn't lead anywhere quiet. It leads to Denver. They're on the move. For supplies, maybe backup, who the hell knows?" "Denver?" Haynes frowned. Why would they move closer to civilization if they're trying to get away from us? Because Samantha's calling the shots, Carter replied, clicking a pen in his hand nervously. She probably thinks she can blend in, lose herself in a bigger city, lay low where the veil of anonymity is thicker, until Caleb screws it up, Haynes muttered. Another close call. As afternoon faded, another tip came through. A white sedan matching a stolen vehicle report spotted leaving a gas station outside Denver's suburbs. Patrol cars flooded the area as choppers buzzed overhead. When officers arrived at an abandoned warehouse, the scene turned volatile. Inside, Samantha and Caleb were holed up, their nerves fraying under the weight of their circumstances. Samantha, her hair disheveled, her designer blouse stained with sweat, paced across the floor, barking orders at a jittery Caleb who sat against an overturned crate, gripping a crowbar. "We stay quiet! We wait this out!" Samantha hissed, her voice teetering on the edge of panic. "They're gonna find us!" Caleb shot back, his tone raw and escalating. "You think this little act is gonna work? They've got my face all over every damn cop's desk from here to Vegas." "They haven't found us yet, have they?" Samantha cut him off, glaring. "Which means she jabbed at her chest with her finger, am the only thing keeping your sorry ass from rotting in a cell." Closing the circle, Carter and Haynes arrived on the scene, flanked by SWAT officers and a growing throng of media vans parked on the outskirts. They surveyed the warehouse, both thinking the same thing. This wasn't going to end peacefully. "We need Caleb out alive," Carter said grimly, pulling on his tactical vest. "He's the only one who'll spill on motive. Samantha will go to her grave before giving us a straight answer." "And if someone makes the wrong move," Haynes countered. Carter's expression hardened. "Then this case gets a hell of a lot messier." As the tactical units prepared to move closer, Carter adjusted his belt and walked toward the makeshift command center with Haynes. "Let's finish this," he muttered. The thrilling manhunt. The late afternoon sun had started its descent over Denver's skyline, its light turning the warehouse district into a maze of long shadows and jagged silhouettes. The once bustling industrial area sat eerily empty, a ghost town of crumbling concrete and rusting machinery. This was where Samantha Calloway and Caleb Reynolds had made their last, desperate stand. Detective Maria Haynes pulled up to the makeshift command post just beyond the perimeter of the warehouse. SWAT trucks, flashing police cars, and a growing crowd of reporters made the scene feel like a spectacle. Tape flapped noisily under the sharp wind as officers shuffled between mobile units, exchanging updates and nervous glances. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. "Jesus, they picked a hell of a spot," Haynes muttered, stepping out of the car and zipping her jacket tighter against the biting cold. Carter climbed out after her, squinting at the building's grim, hulking outline. "They're boxed in," he said, his voice steady but grim. "No way out this time." "Tell that to Samantha," Haynes replied, her hands on her hips as she surveyed the scene. "She's been 3 steps ahead of us this entire time. You really think she hasn't got a plan for this?" "Well," Carter said, cracking his knuckles, "whatever her plan is, we'll make sure it ends here." The calm before the storm. Inside the mobile command post, the mood was all business. Tactical officers crowded around monitors displaying blueprints of the warehouse, while radios crackled sporadically with chatter from units surrounding the target. The drone of helicopters overhead gave the entire scene an edge of urgency. "Detectives," the SWAT captain greeted as Carter and Haynes stepped inside. His voice was clipped, his demeanor no nonsense. "We've got eyes on both suspects. They're holed up in what looks like a storage room toward the center of the building. Reynolds is armed. Reports say he's got a crowbar and possibly a stolen handgun. Calloway hasn't shown any weapons yet, but we're not ruling it out." Carter ran a hand over his face, processing the update. "How secure's the perimeter?" he asked. "Locked tight," the captain replied. "No way in or out without going through us. But it's cramped as hell in there. Corridors, debris, blind corners. If they're desperate, it could get dicey." "They're desperate, all right," Haynes muttered, crossing her arms. "Samantha's smart enough to know this is over, but Caleb? He's a wild card. If his back's against the wall, he's gonna lash out. And we can't let that happen," Carter added firmly. "Our priority is Reynolds. If we can take him alive, we've got a shot at getting the full story." "That'll require a miracle," the captain said dryly, throwing a glance at the warehouse monitors. "But we'll do our best." Inside the warehouse. While tactical teams finalized their positions, Samantha paced nervously inside the dimly lit storage room. The air was thick with dust, and the faint sound of police radios in the distance reminded her just how close they were to being caught. Her blonde hair, usually pristine, was now a tangled mess, and her expensive blouse clung to her skin from sweat and tension. "You need to calm down," she hissed, glaring at Caleb, who sat slumped in a corner gripping the crowbar like a lifeline. "Calm down?" Caleb shot back, his voice raw and trembling with frustration. "They're out there! Dozens of them! SWAT, cops, helicopters! What the hell do you expect me to do, huh? Smile and wait to get cuffed?" Samantha stepped closer, pointing a finger at him. "You listen to me, Caleb. As long as we keep our heads, there's a way out of this." Caleb barked a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "A way out? Are you kidding me? 'Cause unless you've got a tunnel under this building, I don't see one." "I've gotten us this far, haven't I?" Samantha snapped. "You'd be rotting in a cell if it wasn't for me." "Yeah," Caleb countered, his jaw clenched. "And the minute this goes sideways, I'm the one who's gonna get shot in the head while you talk your way out of it." Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Don't play the victim, Caleb. You were in this from the start." Setting the trap back outside, Carter and Haynes joined the SWAT team as they prepared for breach. "What's the approach?" Carter asked, pulling on a tactical vest. "Standard containment," the SWAT captain replied. "Two teams will move in simultaneously from the north and south entrances. We'll funnel them toward the center and cut off their escape routes." "And if Caleb resists?" Haynes asked, her voice low. "We neutralize the threat," the captain said bluntly. "Lethal force if necessary." "That's a problem," Carter muttered. "We need him alive." "We'll do what we can," the captain said, though his tone made it clear that keeping Caleb breathing wasn't a priority. "Maria." Carter turned to Haynes as the SWAT team moved out. "If this goes bad, we might not get another shot. We need answers, and we need them now." "I know," Haynes replied, watching as the tactical units disappeared into the shadows of the warehouse. The break. The operation began swiftly and silently. SWAT officers moved in tactical formations, their boots barely making a sound against the dusty floors. Each breath seemed louder than the police radios crackling softly in their earpieces. Inside the storage room, Samantha heard the faint rumble of movement. She froze, her eyes darting toward the door. "They're coming," she whispered. Caleb gripped the crowbar tighter, his hands shaking. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice weak. Samantha didn't answer. For the first time, her calm facade cracked and the reality of the situation began to sink in. The sound of shattering glass broke the silence as a flashbang detonated just beyond the room. Caleb screamed, ducking instinctively, and Samantha clutched her ears as the bright light and deafening noise overwhelmed the space. Chaos. The next few moments were a blur of shouting, footsteps, and chaos. The door burst open and SWAT officers flooded the room, weapons drawn. Caleb swung the crowbar wildly, his movements erratic and desperate, but he was quickly disarmed and restrained. Samantha, her face pale and hands trembling, didn't resist as she was forced to the ground. Carter and Haynes rushed in moments later, taking in the scene. Caleb was screaming profanities as officers wrestled him into handcuffs, while Samantha sat silently, her head bowed in defeat. "It's over," Haynes said, kneeling down next to Samantha. Samantha looked up slowly, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and contempt. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into," she muttered. "Oh, I think we do," Carter said, his voice cold. "And I can't wait for you to explain it." Post-capture. Back at the station, Caleb and Samantha were placed in separate interrogation rooms. Carter and Haynes stood outside, watching as officers processed the suspects. "You think Samantha's going to talk?" Haynes asked, leaning against the wall. "She'll stall," Carter replied. "That's her specialty. But Caleb, he's cracked. We'll get the truth out of him before she can spin anything." Haynes nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Whatever it takes, we finish this." As they stepped into the interrogation room, the weight of the chase lifted slightly, replaced by the even heavier burden of uncovering the truth. The shocking confession. Detective Maria Haynes shifted uncomfortably in her chair, the cold metal screeching slightly against the concrete floor of the interrogation room. Across the table sat Samantha Calloway, her once pristine demeanor unraveling by the minute. Her designer blouse was wrinkled, her carefully polished nails chipped, and her sharp arrogance had dulled into an uneasy silence. Samantha hadn't spoken beyond asking for a lawyer, but something about her tense jawline and darting eyes told Haynes she was calculating, evaluating, and above all, stalling. In the adjoining room behind the two-way mirror, John Carter stood with his arms crossed, watching the suspect through narrowed eyes. Caleb Reynolds' interrogation was in full swing next door, and he could hear fragments of shouting through the thin walls. He let out an audible sigh, shaking his head. "They're playing chicken with us, Maria," Carter said through his radio, his voice crackling in Haynes's earpiece. She'll sit here all night without saying a damn thing. She thinks we'll screw up before she does. Haynes leaned slightly forward, her arms resting on the frigid steel table as she studied Samantha's expression. Despite Samantha's outward calm, something was different now. Subtle, but there. Haynes noticed the way Samantha's foot tapped ever so slightly. A silent signal she wasn't as composed as she'd like them to believe. "Don't underestimate me, Samantha," Haynes said evenly, her voice soft but deliberate. "I've seen your type before, smart, calculating, and very good at dodging responsibility. But here's the thing, every single one of them broke eventually. The difference between you and them, I think you actually believe you're going to walk away from this." Samantha let out a short, humorless laugh. "Can we not waste my time pretending I don't have options, detective? You've got Caleb screaming next door, and I have a lawyer on the way. This little back and forth?" She gestured broadly with her hand before smirking. "It's cute, but useless." "Cute, huh?" Haynes leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest and letting the silence hang in the air between them. Samantha's smirk faded ever so slightly when Haynes didn't respond. The detective let the tension build like a rubber band stretching to its limit. The cracking point. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Carter opened the door and stepped inside with a file in hand. He didn't say anything, not yet. He didn't need to. With slow, deliberate movements, he pulled out a stack of photos and slid them across the table towards Samantha. One by one, the images came into view: Donna's broken body, partially buried in the damp leaves of Deep Canyon, the ligature marks on Ethan's lifeless wrists, the blood-stained piece of floral fabric Haynes had examined at the scene. Carter said nothing as Samantha's eyes moved over each image, though her lips pressed into a thin line. "We know everything," Carter said simply, his tone filled with quiet authority. "Every detail, every choice you made, every little mistake you left behind." Samantha's eyes flickered up at Carter's. For the first time since the arrest, the faintest trace of uncertainty crossed her face. "You know why Caleb cracked so fast?" Haynes asked, picking up where Carter left off. "Because you're not as smart as you think you are. You left him to do your dirty work. You promised him money you didn't have, safety you couldn't guarantee. And the second he realized you never intended to hold up your end of the deal, he turned on you." "That's a lie," Samantha shot back, though her voice lacked the bite it carried before. "Is it?" Haynes smiled thinly. "Because right now he's next door spilling everything. About the money, about Donna, about the night Ethan went missing. Every word comes back to you, Samantha. Your rules, your ideas, your plan. The trigger." "Caleb Reynolds is a fool," Samantha said suddenly, cutting through Haynes's words. Her voice was venomous, her hands gripping the edges of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. "He's an impulsive, reckless idiot who would have landed himself in prison whether I was there or not." "And yet, you still partnered with him," Carter countered immediately. "Why's that, Samantha? Desperation? Greed? Or did you know you'd need a scapegoat when things went south?" Samantha let out a shaky breath, her mask of indifference slipping faster now. "I didn't plan for any of this to spiral the way it did." "Didn't plan?" Haynes arched an eyebrow. "You didn't plan to kill Donna Mitchell? Is that what you're trying to imply?" Samantha leaned forward now, her voice lowering into a frantic hiss. "Donna pushed me! Do you understand me? She wasn't some innocent victim. That woman would have gutted me financially. She threatened to cut me out of everything I deserved. And for what? To hand it all to Ethan, that useless junkie? Is that supposed to be fair?" Haynes stayed totally still, absorbing Samantha's words. Carter, however, pounced. "So, you killed her," he said, stating it outright, "because you thought it was fair." "I didn't kill Donna!" Samantha snapped, slamming her palm down on the table. Caleb lost his temper. I just pointed him in the right direction." "And Ethan?" Haynes pressed, her voice calm but razor sharp. "What happened to him? Why'd you kill him, Samantha?" Samantha's jaw worked furiously, her fingers twitching as her thoughts visibly raced. For a moment it seemed like she might stay silent, but then the words tumbled out faster than she could stop them. "Ethan got greedy," she spat. "He knew we needed Donna out of the way, but when it was done, he started talking about going to the police. He said he'd confess everything if I didn't give him more money. I couldn't risk it. He could have ruined everything." Carter's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, his voice low and biting. "So, you silenced him." Samantha's face twisted into a grimace, her eyes darting to the photos still spread in front of her. "Caleb did it," she whispered, barely audible now. "But, fine, I told him to. Are you happy? Is that what you wanted to hear?" The fallout Haynes exhaled slowly, her own heart pounding in her chest as Samantha slumped back in her seat, defeated. "Thank you for your honesty," she said evenly. "Though, considering what's coming your way, I'm guessing it wasn't worth much." "You don't understand," Samantha muttered, her gaze distant now. "I didn't have a choice. They backed me into a corner." "Sure you did," Carter said coldly, grabbing the photos and sliding them back into the file. "You just didn't like the options." Samantha didn't respond, and as Carter exited the room, Haynes lingered for a moment longer, studying the woman across from her. All Samantha's manipulation, all her arrogance, it had all boiled down to nothing more than fear and selfishness. "That corner you mentioned," Haynes said softly. "Nobody put you there but yourself." And with that, Haynes stood, leaving Samantha alone with the weight of her choices, and the crushing inevitability of justice waiting just outside the interrogation room. The just verdict. The courtroom in Evergreen County's courthouse buzzed with restless energy. Rows of anxious townsfolk sat squeezed together on the wooden benches, their murmurs filling the air like the hum of a swarm of bees. They had come not just for justice but for closure, to see the story of Donna and Ethan Mitchell's murders finally resolved. Samantha Calloway and Caleb Reynolds sat at the defense table, their starkly opposite demeanors on full display. Samantha, dressed in a sleek black blazer, maintained her cold composure, her sharp eyes scanning the room with calculated disdain. Caleb, chains clinking whenever he shifted, fidgeted like a cornered animal, chewing the inside of his cheek and avoiding everyone's gazes. Detectives Maria Haynes and John Carter sat just behind the prosecutor's table, their hands folded, faces as unreadable as stone statues. They had followed this case from the chilling depths of Deep Canyon to the rotted heart of Evergreen's secrets. After months of pursuit, interrogations, and sleepless nights, they had delivered the defendants to justice. Now all that was left was for the jury to speak. "Samantha's got that look again," Haynes muttered under her breath to Carter. "What look?" Carter asked, though his eyes never shifted from Samantha. "That I'm smarter than every damn person in this room look," Haynes replied. "You'd think being charged with double homicide would knock that smirk off her face." "Doesn't matter," Carter said flatly. "She won't be smirking for long." A trial of two faces. It had taken weeks to bring the trial to its climactic final day. Prosecutor Amanda Reese had delivered a scalding case against Samantha, meticulous and relentless in her presentation. Evidence after evidence had been laid bare, financial records proving Samantha's motive, Caleb's own confession implicating her leadership in both murders, the torn floral fabric linking her to the crime scenes, and even her damning phone records showing calls to Caleb on the night Ethan had gone missing. Reese rose from her seat, approaching the jury with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the weight of evidence was on her side. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Reese began, voice calm but commanding, "what you've seen and heard over these past few weeks paints a picture of Samantha Calloway and Caleb Reynolds as partners in crime. Samantha was the mastermind, calculating and cold, willing to do anything to preserve her imagined entitlement to Donna Mitchell's estate, and Caleb, he was her instrument, the hammer she used to execute her deadly plan." Reese turned sharply toward Samantha. "Samantha Calloway didn't just orchestrate the deaths of Donna Mitchell and Ethan Mitchell. She manipulated everyone around her thinking she could outsmart the law, outsmart justice, and outsmart all of you." Samantha's attorney, a man with a perpetually sweating forehead, raised a feeble objection. "Your Honor, I'd remind the prosecution to refrain from inflammatory rhetoric." "Overruled," Judge Monroe said briskly, folding his hands on the bench. "Continue, Miss Reese." "Thank you, Your Honor," Reese said, her eyes lingering on Samantha just long enough to make the defendant shift uncomfortably in her chair. "The evidence speaks for itself. Samantha is not a victim, no matter how desperately she wants you to believe she is. She is a predator, and predators, ladies and gentlemen, deserve to face the consequences of their actions." The defense crumbles. On the other hand, Caleb's defense was half-hearted at best. His attorney didn't try to argue innocence but leaned heavily on Caleb's impulsive nature and the claim that Samantha had manipulated him from the very beginning. "He is not an evil man," Caleb's attorney argued in his closing statement, his voice shaky as the air in the courtroom grew thicker. "Caleb Reynolds is a man who was used and discarded by Samantha Calloway. He's guilty, yes, but he's also human, a human being swept into something far darker than he ever anticipated." Haynes leaned toward Carter, whispering, "If that's the best argument he's got, Caleb's going to rot." "If there's a God," Carter replied under his breath, "they both will." Verdicts delivered. The jury had deliberated for just under 6 hours. It was long enough to stir the tension in the gallery to an unbearable pitch. When the foreperson finally rose to speak, The crowd leaned forward as one collective entity, breaths held. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Donna Mitchell, the foreperson read, careful and measured, we find the defendant, Samantha Calloway, guilty. Murmurs rippled across the room, though the judge's gavel swiftly silenced them. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder in the death of Ethan Mitchell, we find the defendant, Samantha Calloway, guilty. Samantha showed no visible reaction, though a sharp tilt of her head suggested her confidence had cracked slightly. The foreperson moved to Caleb. On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Ethan Mitchell, we find the defendant, Caleb Reynolds, guilty. Carter felt Haynes exhale beside him. It had been months of relentless work, not just solving the case but carrying the weight of the victims' stories on their backs. Judge Monroe addressed the courtroom. Samantha Calloway is sentenced to death by lethal injection, her crimes representing the utmost malice and premeditation. His voice was firm yet heavy. Caleb Reynolds is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his role in Ethan Mitchell's death and his accountability as an accomplice. The aftermath. Outside the courthouse, Evergreen's residents finally spilled into the streets. Reporters shoved microphones into the faces of anyone willing to comment, their cameras swiveling from the courtroom steps to the detectives emerging into the pale sunlight. "Detectives, over here!" one shouted. "How does it feel to see Samantha Calloway sentenced to death?" Carter ignored the press, descending the courthouse steps with brisk determination. Haynes, however, slowed her pace, allowing herself a brief moment to answer. "It feels like justice," she said simply. "Justice for Donna and Ethan." As the two walked through the growing crowd, whispers of relief mingled with conversations about blame, about grief, and about moving on. The weight that had burdened Evergreen for so long felt a little lighter. "What now?" Haynes asked once they'd reached the sanctity of Carter's car. Carter leaned against the driver's door, gazing past the town and into the horizon. "Now, we start sleeping better, and then we wait for the next mess someone makes." He smirked faintly. "Never goes quiet for long, you know." Haynes chuckled softly, shaking her head as she climbed into the passenger seat. "You're a real optimist, Carter." "Part of my charm," he replied, sliding behind the wheel. As the car rumbled to life and merged onto Evergreen's quiet streets, it felt for the first time in months as though the town could finally begin the long process of healing. But for Carter and Haynes, the work was never done. Justice had been served, yes, but the ghosts of the Mitchell family would linger, like so many others before them.